3 o'clock on a Wednesday, and a hand came down flat on a boardroom table, hard enough to make the coffee jump. 11 men went for the door like the building was on fire. One didn't. He was nobody. 14th floor. A gray shirt and a projector remote and a face that had learned over 4 exhausting years to give away nothing at all. He looked at the most powerful woman in that tower, and he did not see a dragon. He saw a hand that would not stop shaking. And he said so. Somewhere in that same city, a man with a golf tan was already writing a child's name on a legal pad. Behind a door in an empty apartment, something had been sealed shut for 7 years. Wallpaper stopping, 3/4 of the way up a wall. A light switch. Nobody had touched since a Tuesday in August. 2 people, 2 graves, the same impossible number, and 6 hours left. The following is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is coincidental. 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, and the glass tower on Mercer Street was about to learn what its own CEO sounded like when she finally broke. Adrienne Vance brought her hand down, flat on the boardroom table. Not a slam exactly. Worse than a slam. A slam is loud. This was the sound of 40 years of holding it together, giving out in one single stroke, and the coffee cups jumped, and 11 of the most powerful men in that building flinched like schoolboys caught passing notes. "Out," she said. Nobody moved. "All of you. Now." Then they moved. God, did they move. Chairs scraped. Somebody knocked a legal pad off the table and didn't stop to pick it up. A man who managed $900 million in assets fumbled the door handle twice on his way out because his hands weren't working right. And when the door swung shut, the room held exactly 2 people, Adrienne Vance, and a tired man in a gray shirt standing by the wall with a projector remote in his hand. Because he had come in at 2:55 to fix a display cable, and nobody had told him a war was about to start in here. His name was Wesley Marsh. Everybody called him Wes. 35 years old, project management, 14th floor, and by the strict laws of that building, he should have been out the door first and fastest. He didn't leave. He looked at her hand, still flat on the table. He looked at her shoulders. He looked at the way her jaw was locked so hard, the muscle stood out under her skin like a wire. And he said the truest thing anybody had said in that room all day. "You're shaking." Adrienne Vance did not look up. "Get out." "I will." He set the remote down on the credenza. Gently. Like the room was already broken, and he didn't want to break it further. "Cable's fixed. You won't have trouble with the projector again." "Mr. Marsh." "Mr. Marsh." Now she looked up, and her eyes were red-rimmed and furious about it. Furious at being seen, furious at her own body for telling on her. "Do you have any idea what you just walked into?" "No, ma'am." "Then walk back out of it." So he did. "Except at the door." He stopped one hand on the frame, and he said it without turning around, which is the only way a man like Wes Marsh has ever been able to say anything that costs him something. "Nobody in this building has ever asked if you're all right." And then he left. And Adrienne Vance sat alone in a room built for 12 with her hand still flat on the table, and did not move for a very long time. 10 hours before that, Wes Marsh had woken up at 4:47 in the morning, 13 minutes before his alarm. The way he had woken up every single morning for 4 years, like his body, had set its own clock to a station that no longer broadcast. He didn't reach for the phone. He reached for the other side of the bed. The way you reach for a stair that isn't there. Hand out weight already committed, and then nothing but cold sheet under his palm, and that small drop in the stomach that 4 years had not once managed to sand down. He pulled his hand back. He lay in the dark and counted ceiling tiles he couldn't see. And he told himself the thing he told himself every morning, which was, "Get up, Wes. She needs you up." She was Wren, 7 years old, down the hall asleep with one arm hanging off the mattress and a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Pockets wedged under her chin. The rabbit had been a gift from her mother, back when her mother could still give things. Wes got up. He didn't turn on the overhead light because the overhead light hurt his eyes and made the apartment look exactly as small as it actually was. He used the little bulb over the stove instead. Warm, yellow, forgiving. Water on, 2 eggs cracked into a bowl, a fork, and while he beat them, he listened to the building wake up around him. Pipes knocking. The neighbor upstairs running a shower he could set a watch by. A truck downshifting somewhere out on the avenue hauling something to somebody, 35 years old. And he could count on one hand the number of people who knew the actual truth about his life. The truth was this: Wesley Marsh was drowning, and he had gotten very, very good at smiling while he did it. "Daddy." He turned. Wren was in the kitchen doorway in dinosaur pajamas hair, a wild brown cloud, rubbing one eye with a fist. "Hey, Bug, you're up early." "I heard the eggs." "You heard the eggs." "I have good ears." "You have bat ears." "Bats are blind." "Bats are absolutely not blind. That's a myth, and I want you to know I'm disappointed." She climbed onto the stool at the counter, and he slid the plate in front of her. And for 1 minute, one entire, whole, unbroken minute, everything in Wes Marsh's world was exactly the shape it was supposed to be. His daughter eating eggs, the little light over the stove, gray morning coming up soft in the window over the sink. Then Wren said, "Is today the day you get the money?" He stopped wiping the counter. "What money, baby?" "The money you said on the phone. To Grandma Coralie." She pushed egg around with her fork. "You said if you got it, we could stay." He set the rag down. He came around the counter and crouched so he was eye level with her, because his own father had never once done that for him, and Wes had decided a long time ago that he was going to be a man who crouched. "Wren, look at me." She looked. "Grown-up money is not your job. It is my job. Worrying about it is my entire whole full-time job. You have a different job. What's my job? Eggs, school, being 7. That's 3 jobs. You're an overachiever. Deal. Deal." She chewed. Small. Then, "But are we going to have to move again?" And there it was. The thing that lived under his ribs like a second heartbeat. The thing that never fully went to sleep, just went quiet. Sometimes the way a dog goes quiet without ever closing both eyes. They had moved twice in 4 years. Once when the medical bills came and swallowed the house whole. Once when the first apartment got too expensive after the second round of billing arrived. The round that came after, addressed to a woman who no longer existed. Because grief does not stop the mail. That is the part nobody warns you about. The mail keeps coming. The rent keeps coming. The kid keeps needing breakfast. "We're not moving," Wes said. "Not this time, I promise you." He had no business making that promise. He knew it the second it left his mouth. He made it anyway, because that's what you do. You look your kid in the eye, and you lie a little, and then you go out into the world, and you try like hell to make the lie come true. The company was called Vance Ardmore Holdings. It took up 11 floors of a glass tower downtown, and Wes Marsh had worked there as a senior project manager for 2 years and 4 months. He dropped Wren at school at 7:50. He waited at the curb until he saw her go through the doors, because a man does not drive away until the doors close behind his child. That was a rule. He had a lot of rules. Most of them he'd made up in a hospital hallway 4 years ago, standing very still at 3 in the morning, when there was nothing left to do but make rules. Then 40 minutes of traffic and elevator and the 14th floor. And then he put on the face. The face was important. The face said, "I've got it handled." The face said, "Nothing's wrong here, thanks for asking." The face was the single most valuable thing Wes Marsh owned, and he had built it one crack at a time. Marsh, Amir Haddad, fell in beside him in the hallway, with 2 coffees, handing one over without being asked, which was the entire reason he was the closest thing Wes had to a friend in that building. 40. Divorced. Funny in the dry, sideways way that gets a person through a bad Monday. "You look like death." "Thank you. I moisturize." "You hear..." "Hear what?" Amir dropped his voice. "Thorn Merger's dead. Blew up Tuesday night. Whole thing." Wes stopped walking. "Dead how?" "Dead like the Thorn family walked. 8 months of work gone." Amir took a sip. "Vance has been in the boardroom since 6 a.m. She made Prasad cry." Prasad cries at car commercials. "Not the point. The point is, stay off 14 today, my friend. Dragons out of the cave." And Wes didn't say anything to that. He just drank his coffee and thought the thing he'd been thinking for about a year now, which was that everybody in this building had a nickname for Adrienne Vance. And not one of them had ever actually looked at her. Because Wes had looked. You can't help it if you pay attention. And paying attention was the last thing he had left that hadn't been taken from him. He'd noticed she came in before anyone and left after everyone. He'd noticed that in 2 years and 4 months, he had never once heard her mention a husband, a partner, a friend, a vacation, a Saturday, a plan. He'd noticed she never ate lunch with a single human being. He'd noticed that on certain days, and he had tried and failed to find the pattern of them. She came in with her eyes red, and her voice pitched a half-tone lower, and on those days she was harder than usual, and everybody hated her a little more, and nobody, not once, asked if she was okay. He'd noticed her office light burning at 9 at night, at 10, at 11. And Wes Marsh knew exactly what it looks like when a person builds a fortress out of work so they don't have to go home to an empty room. Because he was living in one himself. At 11:20 that morning, the email came. From HR. Subject line confidential, please review. He opened it, and his coffee went to acid in his stomach. Restructuring, cost reduction, consolidation of the project management division. Effective end of quarter, 4 senior positions will be eliminated. His name was on the list. Wes read it 3 times. Then he sat very still and did the math he had already done 100 times in his head, and the math came out the same as it always did. Rent, Wren's after-school program, the last of the medical debt, which he was still paying down at $58 a month, a payment he had never once missed, because missing it felt like abandoning her all over again. Groceries, car payment, and the health insurance, which ran through this job, which covered Wren's inhaler, which cost, without insurance, more than he could say out loud, without his hands going cold. 6 weeks. He had 6 weeks. Marsh. He turned. Gordon Sales. Chief Financial Officer. 55 golf tan handshake like a wet towel. one of the 11 who'd been in that boardroom since 6. You get the email. I got the email. Rough break. Sales didn't sound like a man who thought it was a rough break. He sounded like a man reading a card. Listen, between us, that list isn't final. Vance signs off Friday. Okay. So if I were you? Sales leaned in a half-inch. I'd make myself very useful this week. Guy in your spot. Kid at home. He clicked his tongue against his teeth. I'd be kissing some ring, is all I'm saying. And he walked off. And Wes sat there with both hands flat on his desk, breathing. Kissing some ring. Wesley Marsh had never kissed a ring in his life. He'd sold his wife's car himself in a diner parking lot to a stranger with cash, rather than tell his own mother-in-law he needed help. He'd worn the same 3 suits for 2 years. He'd eaten dinner as I'm not hungry more nights than he would ever admit to a living soul so that a 7-year-old could have seconds. Pride was the last thing he had that nobody had taken from him yet. But pride doesn't fill an inhaler. 3 months earlier. This matters. Hold on to it. There'd been a company thing. End of quarter, catering the kind of event where everybody stands around holding a glass they don't want. And Wes had come out into the 14th floor hallway at 10 p.m. to breathe and found Adrienne Vance out there alone, standing by the window, holding a glass of wine she had not touched. 200 people 40 feet away, and she was out in a hallway by herself, and Wes recognized it instantly because he had done the exact same thing at his own wife's funeral reception. She'd looked over. They're circling in there. The board. Everyone. Somebody's nephew needs a job. Somebody's fund needs a look. Somebody's wife has a foundation. She'd said it flat. Nobody comes to talk. They come to ask. And Wes had been so tired. That's his only defense. 14-hour day kid with a fever at home, 2 hours of sleep behind him, and none ahead. So he said, "Maybe you should just marry me." She'd turned. "Excuse me. Then nobody'd dare pressure you again." He hurt himself. God, he hurt himself. That was a joke. That was a bad joke. I'm going to go find a wall to walk into. And Adrienne Vance had set her glass down on the window ledge. And she'd crossed the hallway. And she had taken his hand. Just taken it. Both of hers around his one. Held it. Didn't shake it. Didn't squeeze it. Just held it for about 4 seconds in the fluorescent light of an empty corridor. And she'd said absolutely nothing. And then she'd let go and walked back into the party. And Wes Marsh had stood in that hallway for a full minute, with his hand still half raised, thinking, I am going to be fired on Monday. He wasn't fired on Monday. She never mentioned it again. Not once in 3 months. But she remembered where they were standing. He would find that out later in a way that would take his legs out from under him. 6:40 in the evening. The floor had emptied. The cleaners were starting their rounds. And Wes went looking for the 14th floor break room to rinse out his mug before the drive home. That's where she was. Adrienne Vance. Alone at the little round table in the corner. Still in the charcoal suit from that morning. Under the ugliest overhead light in the building, staring at her phone with an expression Wes Marsh would remember for the rest of his life. Because it wasn't the dragon. It wasn't the boardroom or the woman who'd made Prasad cry or the hand coming down flat on the table at 3 o'clock. It was the face of a person who has just been hit somewhere that doesn't leave a mark. Jaw tight, eyes wet, and absolutely enraged about being wet. Thumb hovering over the screen and not moving, just looking at it. The way you look at a photograph of somebody who isn't coming back. He should have walked away. Every rule in that building said walk away. She was the most powerful person within 5 miles, and on Friday she was going to sign a piece of paper with his name on it. The smart move, the Gordon Sales move, was to back out of the doorway and pretend he'd seen nothing. Instead, Wes Marsh did the thing that had gotten him into and out of trouble his entire life. He told the truth. You look like somebody who could use a worse cup of coffee than the one you've got. Her head came up fast, and the mask slammed back into place so quickly it was almost frightening to watch, like seeing a wound close over in real time. This is the executive break room. Employees use 12. I know, I'm washing a mug. 30 seconds. He went to the sink. He did not hurry. And while he rinsed it with his back to her, he said, for what it's worth, everyone thinks the Thorne deal falling through is going to sink us. It isn't. That deal was rotten. Their people cooked the last 2 quarters. Everybody in project management could see it. We just weren't allowed to say so. Silence behind him. Then cold. And how would a project manager know that? Because a project manager reads the actual documents. He shut off the water, turned, dried the mug with a paper towel. Instead of the summaries, finance writes to make finance look good. She stared at him. You dodged a bullet Tuesday night, Ms. Vance. You're going to get told for a month that you failed. You didn't. You made the finance floor look like fools, and they are never going to forgive you for it. That's what today was actually about. For a long moment, she didn't speak, and Wes watched something move behind her eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or the specific loneliness of a person who has been surrounded by liars for so long that one true sentence lands like a slap across the face. What's your name? It wasn't a question. Wes Marsh, Project Management, 14th floor. He gave a short, tired laugh. 14th floor for another 6 weeks. I'm on the restructuring list. You'd know better than me. You're the one signing it. He hadn't meant it to come out sharp. It came out sharp anyway, because he was tired, and he was scared, and he was standing in front of the woman who was holding his daughter's asthma medication in the palm of her hand, without knowing it, and would not care if she did. And the second it left his mouth, he braced. For the cold. For Mr. Marsh security will walk you out. It didn't come. Instead, Adrienne Vance looked at him for another second. Then she looked back down at her phone, and something in her just gave. The tightness in her jaw broke. Her shoulders came down 1/2 inch, and she said very quietly in a voice that did not belong to any CEO anywhere, Do you have somewhere to be, Mr. Marsh? I have to pick up my daughter. 7:15, after school. A daughter. She said it strangely, like the word had a splinter in it. Wren, she's 7. He paused. And her mother? He set the mug down on the counter. He had been asked this question maybe 200 times in 4 years, and he had never once found a good way to answer it. So he answered it the only way he had. There's no mother anymore. It's just us. The words fell into that room and sat there. Adrienne looked up at him again, and for the first time, the ice was entirely gone. What was underneath it wasn't warmth exactly. It was recognition. It was the look one wounded animal gives another across an open field. Not comfort, just the plain acknowledgement. Oh, you too. Sit down, she said. Ms. Vance, You have 22 minutes before you need to leave to make it across town by 7:15. I know exactly how long it takes to get anywhere in this city. A beat. Sit down. That's not a request from your boss. That's a... She stopped. Something crossed her face. I don't actually know what it is. Sit down anyway. And Wesley Marsh, who never asked anyone for anything, who had built his entire life around the principle that he would rather sink alone than reach for a hand, pulled out the chair across from Adrienne Vance and sat down. She turned her phone face down on the table, a small, deliberate motion, like putting a lid on something. "They think I don't hear it," she said. "The names. The nicknames. The dragon. The ice queen." A thin, bitter smile. "My personal favorite is the one the junior analysts use. They think I don't know. The woman who fired her own heart." She turned the phone over and back, a nervous motion. "Clever. Cruel. They're not wrong. They're wrong. You've worked here 2 years, Mr. Marsh. You've spoken to me, 4 times? What could you possibly—" "I've watched you." And then he heard how that sounded, and shook his head. I mean I've paid attention. It's a bad habit. I pay attention to people." He turned his mug a quarter turn on the table. "You come in before the sun. You leave after everybody. You never take a Friday. You've got a corner office with a view of the entire city, and you keep the blinds shut." She didn't move. "And about once a month you come in, and you're harder than usual, and everybody says watch out, she's in a mood, and nobody, not one person in 11 floors asks if you're okay." He looked up. "I know what that looks like. I've got a pretty good view of it from the inside." Adrienne Vance went very still. "What happened to your wife?" Not gently. Directly. The way one broken person is allowed to ask another. "Cancer. It was fast." He said it evenly. 11 weeks. First appointment to the last one. Ren was 3. His voice didn't shake. He had sanded this story down over 4 years until he could say it without falling apart, which was its own particular kind of terrible. "People tell you it gets easier. It doesn't get easier. You just get stronger, and everybody decides to call that easier because it lets them stop thinking about you." "Yes," Adrienne said, so quietly he almost missed it. "That's exactly right." And Wes looked at her, really looked, and understood all at once and completely that they were not talking about his wife anymore. Who was he? Her hand tightened around the phone. For a second, he thought she'd throw him out. He watched her fight it. Watched 7 years of walls try to hold. And he watched them lose. Right there in the ugly light of an executive break room at 6:58 on a Wednesday. Because sometimes a person carries something alone for so long that the first time anyone offers to help hold it, the whole structure just comes down. "His name was Emmett," she said, and stopped. "Emmett Thorne." Wes's coffee mug stopped halfway to the table. Thorne. The merger. 8 months. The deal that had blown up Tuesday night. The family that had walked. Ms. Vance. Adrienne. She was looking at the window now at her own reflection over the dark city. In this room. At this hour. When it's just a breath. "You can call me Adrienne." He stood. He picked up his mug. He got as far as the door. And then he stopped. Because there was one more thing, and Wes Marsh was a man who had learned that you don't leave the important thing unsaid. He had learned that in a hospital hallway. He had learned it the hard way. "The restructuring list," he said. "I'm not asking you to take my name off it. I want to be very clear about that. I've never asked anybody for anything in my life, and I'm not going to start by begging my boss for a job in a break room." He took a breath. "But I've got a 7-year-old with asthma, and this job is her medicine. So I'll just say this. Whatever number that division has to cut, I can find it for you somewhere that isn't 4 families. Give me till Friday. I'll bring you a better answer than the one finance handed you." He nodded once. "That's not begging. That's me doing my job." He turned the handle. "Mr. Marsh." He stopped. Adrienne Vance was standing now. And she was not looking at him like a CEO looks at an employee. She was looking at him the way you look at a road sign in a country where you don't speak the language and have been driving for a very long time. "How far is your daughter's school from here?" 22 minutes. You said so yourself." "Then you'll make it." She picked up her phone off the table. Face down still. "Call whoever watches her at night." "I'm sorry." "Call them. Ask if they can stay until 10. Wes stood in the doorway of the executive break room with a wet mug in his hand and his job in her pocket, and absolutely no idea what was happening. "Why?" And Adrienne Vance said, "Because I'm about to do something I have not done in 7 years, and if I wait until tomorrow, I won't do it at all." 9 o'clock that night. 6 hours almost to the minute after her hand came down flat on that boardroom table. The lobby of her building was worth more than everything Wes Marsh had ever owned, and he gave his name to a doorman and rode a private elevator up and up and up, and he thought the whole ride, "This is a mistake. This is such a mistake." She opened the door herself. No suit. That was the first thing that hit him, and it did something to him he was not prepared for. Dark slacks, a soft gray sweater, no shoes, her hair down. Without the armor, she looked younger and more tired and appallingly, unbearably real. "You came," she said. "I genuinely wasn't sure." "I almost didn't." "That's honest." "You said you wanted honest. It's the only thing I know how to do." She stepped back, and he walked in. And he stopped. He had braced for luxury. He'd prepared himself for it on the whole drive over the marble, the art, the expensive, cold perfection that would remind him precisely how far apart their two worlds were. That wasn't what stopped him. What stopped him was that the apartment was empty. Not empty of furniture. Empty of life. No photographs on the walls. No mail on the counter. No coat over a chair. No shoes by the door, but her own. No mug in the sink. No plant. No clutter. Not one single piece of evidence that a human being actually lived here, instead of just sleeping here between the hours she couldn't be at the office. It was the apartment of somebody who had stopped years ago expecting anyone to come over. It looked, Wes thought, exactly the way the empty side of his own bed felt. "You can say it," Adrienne said, watching his face. "Everyone thinks it. They just don't come up here to see it." "How long have you lived here?" 6 years. "Adrienne, there's nothing here. There's me here." She said it lightly. It did not come out light. And then she crossed the room to him, and she did not say anything else, and she took his hand. The second time. Both of hers around his one. Exactly the way she had in that hallway 3 months ago. And exactly like that night, she said nothing at all. She just turned and led him. Down a corridor lined with nothing. Past a bedroom with the door open and the bed made so tightly it looked like a hotel. Past a bathroom. Past a linen closet. To the end of the hall, where there was a door, closed. And she stopped in front of it, and she let go of his hand, and Wes Marsh stood there in the dark of a stranger's hallway, and understood that he had just been brought somewhere no one else had ever been brought. 7 years, Adrienne Vance said. Her voice had gone strange, small and very young. "I have not opened this door in 7 years. "What's in there?" She put her hand on the knob, and the tendon stood out across the back of her hand, and Wes watched her turn it a quarter inch and stop and stand there, breathing like a woman at the edge of a very high place. "Adrienne." Her hand came off the knob. "Not tonight," she said. And she walked back down the hall and left him standing there. And Wes Marsh looked at that closed door in that empty apartment, in the most expensive building in the city, and every instinct he had, every single one, built over 4 years of paying attention. Because paying attention was all he had left, told him that whatever was behind it, it was not what he thought. And he was right. He didn't sleep. I got home at 10:40, paid Mrs. Okonkwo from 2 doors down, checked on his daughter. Arm hanging off the mattress, Mr. Pockets jammed under her chin, the whole nightly still life of her. And then he sat at his kitchen table, under the little light over the stove, and did not sleep. Because there was a door in his head now, and he couldn't stop turning the knob on it. 7 years, she'd said. And a man does not say 7 years about a closet. A man does not walk a near stranger down a hallway at 9 at night to show him a closet. So what was it? An office, a shrine. Photographs, letters, there's a dead man's suits still hanging in plastic. Except that wasn't it either. Because Wes had seen her hand on that knob. And he knew the difference between grief that wants to be looked at and grief that has been walled up. That door wasn't a shrine. That door was a wound with a hinge on it. At 2:15 in the morning, he gave up on sleeping and pulled out the budget files instead, because there was exactly one thing in this world Wesley Marsh could do about any of it, and it was not sitting in the dark, inventing what was behind a door in a building he'd never see again. It was finding her a number. He had until Friday. Thursday, he stayed at the office until 9, then brought it home and spread it across the kitchen table after Wren went to bed. And he worked under the small bulb over the stove, the same light he made her eggs under, because the overhead one hurt his eyes, and because if he was honest, and he was always honest, it was his one skill and his one curse, because the small light felt like company. A legal pad. A cold cup of coffee. 4 years of practice at staying awake for things that mattered. He crossed out almost everything he wrote, because the savings weren't in the division. He kept looking, and they weren't there. Nobody in project management was padding anything. They were 4 departments doing 6 departments' work, which is exactly what you'd expect from people who'd been told for 2 years that they were lucky to have jobs. So he went sideways. He stopped looking at what the division spent on people, and started looking at what it spent on everybody else. At 11:47, that Thursday night with his shirt untucked and his eyes burning, Wes Marsh opened the vendor contracts. 3 outside contractors, doing work that overlapped by close to 40%. 2 of those contracts had auto-renewed for 6 consecutive years without a single competitive rebid, which does not happen by accident in a company with a functioning finance floor. And one of them, he circled it 3 times. And then he just sat there. Because the registered agent on the 3rd contract was a dental practice. A dental practice. Wes read it again. A dental practice in a strip mall 2 states over was the legal address of a consulting firm billing Vance Ardmore $400,000 a year for process optimization. And it took him another 40 minutes with a public records search and a very bad cup of instant coffee to find out that the dentist who owned that practice was married to Gordon Sales's daughter. Gordon Sales, Chief Financial Officer. Golftan. Wet handshake. I'd be kissing some ring is all I'm saying. Wes added it up. Then he checked it. Then he checked it a 3rd time, standing at the counter, because he'd stopped being able to trust his own arithmetic at that hour. 6 years of billing, routed through a son-in-law's practice, coming out to almost 4 times the total salary cost of the 4 people on the restructuring list. 4 times. Wes Marsh sat down at his own kitchen table at 2 in the morning and understood with a cold that started at the back of his neck and went all the way down that he was not holding a budget analysis anymore. He was holding a live grenade. And he had exactly 1 person he could hand it to. Friday evening, 8 o'clock. He almost didn't go. Again. He stood in his own kitchen with the folder under his arm, and Mrs. Okonkwo already settled on the couch with her knitting, and he thought, "This is a mistake. This is such an unbelievable mistake. She is your boss. She is a billionaire. You are a widower with $40 in checking until payday, and a folder that is going to blow a hole through the 14th floor. And whatever this was, it could only end 2 ways. Either it was nothing, in which case he was humiliating himself, or it was something in which case he was gambling the only job that kept his daughter breathing on a woman the entire building called the Ice Queen. He went anyway. I went because 4 years ago he had stood in a hospital hallway at 3 in the morning and learned that the things that haunt you are never the risks you took. They're the doors you didn't walk through, the words you didn't say while there was still somebody there to hear them. The regrets with teeth were always the moments he'd been too scared to move. So he drove across town and rode the elevator up and up and up. She opened the door herself again, and this time she'd tried. That was what got him. The counter had food on it. Actual food, arranged with visible effort by somebody who had clearly never arranged food in her life. Cheese. A lot of cheese. An unreasonable quantity of cheese. I panicked, Adrienne said before he could open his mouth. I had groceries delivered because I realized I couldn't remember the last time I had a guest, and I bought cheese, and I don't even like cheese, and I have been standing here for 20 minutes, thinking about how I bought cheese like a woman in a movie. Adrienne. I'm nervous. Isn't that ridiculous? She gripped the edge of the counter and laughed at herself, and it was real. This morning I sat across from 11 men who want my job, and I wasn't nervous. I'm standing in my own kitchen, and I'm nervous. I'm nervous too. Does that help? A little. He set the folder down on the counter, and her eyes went to it immediately, and something in the room changed temperature. That's Friday, she said. That's Friday. You said you'd bring me a number. I brought you a number. He didn't slide it toward her. Before you open it, I need you to understand something. I went looking for a budget line. This is what was underneath the budget line. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Neither can I. Neither can whoever you have to tell next. Now he pushed it an inch. I want to keep my job, Adrienne, but not like this. Not by handing you a grenade and walking out. So before you look, know that it's a grenade. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she sat down on the stool at her own counter and opened it. And Wes watched her read. He watched her face because her face was the only thing in that apartment worth watching. Page 1. Nothing moved. Page 2. Something tightened at the corner of her mouth. Page 3. The page with the dental practice. The page with the name. And Adrienne Vance went absolutely completely still. The way a person goes still when the floor they've been standing on turns out to be ice. Gordon, she said. Flat. No inflection at all. Gordon. Wes confirmed. She kept reading. All of it. Every page. She didn't rush, and she didn't skip, and when she was finished, she closed the folder and put her hand flat on top of it and looked at the wall for about 6 seconds, and then she started to laugh. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was low and dark, and it frightened him a little. Do you know what he told me 3 weeks ago? In my office. Adrienne. He sat in the chair by my window, and he told me the division was bloated, and that if I truly loved this company, I would have to make some hard decisions about, and I want you to hear the phrase because he used the phrase, the human cost. She laughed again, softer, uglier. The human cost. Her jaw worked. 4 families. He was going to put 4 families out on the street to cover his own theft. And he was going to make me sign it. So that if it ever came apart, my name would be the one on the paper. Yeah, Wes said quietly. That's about the size of it. She stood up. She walked to the window and stood there with her back to him. And when she spoke again, her voice had changed. It had gone quiet and precise and very cold. And Wes understood he was hearing the actual thing now. The thing all those nicknames had been reaching for and missing. Not cruelty. Something much more focused than cruelty. Who else knows? Nobody. I built it myself. It's not in any system. That legal pad's in my bag, and these are the only copies. Your friend, Haddad. Wes's stomach dropped a little, that she knew Amir's name. Amir doesn't know anything. I didn't tell him. I didn't tell anybody. Good. A slow nod. Because if this leaks before I'm ready, Gordon lawyers up the shelves get scrubbed, and it becomes my word against his in a way that costs 2 years and a great deal of money, and he probably still walks. She turned around. But if it stays quiet until Monday. And there it was. A thin, terrible smile. Monday, when the board convenes, and I put this folder on the table in front of 11 men who have spent all week telling me I failed. She came back and sat down. The 4 names come off, permanently. There is no restructuring. There never needed to be one, the savings Gordon said we had to find. We're sitting in his son-in-law's dental office the entire time. Wes let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since 2 in the morning. Thank you. Don't thank me. You did this. I just get to sign it. And then quieter, almost to herself. Emmett would have liked you. There it was. The name again. It landed in that kitchen the way it had landed in the break room. With weight. And this time, Wes didn't step around it. Adrienne. What's behind the door? She didn't answer for a long time. She turned her wineglass a quarter turn on the stone, then back. That same nervous motion she did with her phone. Tell me about him first, Wes said. You don't have to open anything. Just tell me about him. So she did. His name was Emmett Thorne. And yes, Thorne Ardmore. The deal that died Tuesday night was his family's company. Adrienne. That's the part nobody knows. That's the part that made this week. You have no idea, Wes. When that deal came across my desk 8 months ago, and I saw the name Thorne on the cover, I nearly threw up in my own boardroom. And you pursued it anyway. For 8 months, I sat in rooms with his father and his brothers, and I negotiated, and I smiled, and I pretended I'd never. Her voice caught. She pressed on. And Tuesday night, it fell apart. And every single person in that building thought I was upset because I lost a merger. She looked up. I wasn't upset because I lost a merger. I was upset because for 8 months having that deal alive meant I still had a reason to say his family's name out loud. In a meeting. In an email. Out loud, Wes in a room like he was still attached to something. A breath. And now it's over. Now it's really over. All of it. Wes didn't touch his wine. He just listened, which it turned out was the rarest thing anyone had offered her in 7 years. We met when I was 34, she said, before the company was anything, before I was anything. I was working 18-hour days trying to build Vance Ardmore out of nothing, and I was God. I was hard. Even then. I'd already decided the world was a thing you conquer, not a thing you live in. And then she smiled. And it was the first real smile Wes had ever seen on her, and it rearranged her entire face. Emmett thought that was hilarious. He thought I was hilarious. He was the only person alive who was never once impressed by me, and never once afraid of me. And it made me insane. And then it made me... She stopped. He left me notes. Notes. The little ones. In my coat pockets. In my briefcase. Folded into my day planner. Just nonsense. She was crying now, and not fighting it. You forgot to eat lunch again, didn't you? The woman at the coffee cart says hi. Stop working. Come home, I made the bad pasta you like. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Brusque, almost angry at herself. 7 years, and I still find them. In old coats. In books. I found one last spring in a jacket I hadn't worn since, and I sat down on the floor of my closet for 2 hours reading 4 words in his handwriting. What did it say? Proud of you, always. Wes didn't say anything, because there was nothing to say, and because he had learned in 4 years that the people who try to say something are the ones who make it worse. We were going to be married that October, Adrian said. In July he had a headache that wouldn't go away. In August they found the tumor, and by the time the leaves changed, she stopped. How long? Wes said. What? From the first appointment. How long? And she looked at him. And something passed between them, across that stone counter that Wes would spend the rest of his life trying to describe to people, and never quite managing it. 10 weeks, Adrienne said. 10 weeks and 4 days. Mine was 11. I know. You told me. 11 weeks, he said again, like a man double-checking a lock. First appointment to the funeral. And they sat with that. 2 people who had each been handed, by 2 different doctors in 2 different cities, years apart, the exact same impossible arithmetic. The violent shortness of it. The way it doesn't leave you time to prepare. The way you're still arguing with the diagnosis when the person is already gone. Nobody understands the number, Adrienne said. People understand cancer. Nobody understands the number. They think you got a year. They think you had time to say things. You had 10 weeks and 4 days to say a lifetime of things. And I spent 4 of them arguing with an insurance company. Wes let out a sound that was almost a laugh, and almost not. I spent 6 of mine on the phone with a billing department in another state. Do you want to know the worst one? She was smiling and crying at the same time now. 2 days after the funeral. 2 days. A woman called about a copay, and I said he's dead. And she said, I'll need to speak with the account holder. Adrienne stared at him. They said that to you too. They say it to everybody. And then Adrienne Vance put her face in both hands and laughed until she cried in a kitchen with too much cheese in it at 11 o'clock on a Friday night. Because sometimes the only thing you can do with the absurd cruelty of it is laugh at it with the one other person who was also there. At 11:40, she stood up. Come with me. Adrienne, I want to show you something. And I want to do it right now, before I talk myself out of it. Because I have talked myself out of it 2,556 times. He didn't ask how she knew the number. She led him down the hallway, past the bedroom made up like a hotel, past the linen closet, to the end, to the door. And this time she didn't stop. She turned the knob, and she pushed, and she reached in, and found a light switch she had not touched in 7 years. And Wes Marsh looked into the room, and everything he had assumed was wrong. It was a nursery, half-finished, pale yellow wallpaper 3/4 up one wall, and then just stopping. Mid-roll, a seam that didn't reach the corner, the pencil line still there where somebody had measured the next strip and never cut it. A crib in a flat box against the wall, still taped shut, the picture on the front faded on one side from 7 years of a window nobody ever opened the blinds on. 2 cans of paint on the drop cloth. Sealed. Never opened. A stepladder. And on the windowsill a small, stuffed elephant with a ribbon around its neck, sitting exactly where somebody had set it down one afternoon, in a good mood on an ordinary day, when the whole thing was still going to happen. Wes couldn't speak. "I was 11 weeks, Adrienne said, and her voice was the smallest thing he had ever heard. "That's the number, Wes. That's my number. 11 weeks pregnant, and Emmett was 3 weeks into the 10 weeks and 4 days, and I hadn't told anybody yet, because we were waiting until 12. You wait until 12. That's what they tell you. Wait until 12, then it's safe to tell people." She was looking into that room and not at him. "I lost the baby on a Tuesday, in a hospital bathroom, 2 floors down from where he was." Wes put his hand on the doorframe because he needed something. "And I went back upstairs," she said, "and I sat in the chair by his bed, and I did not tell him." Adrienne. He was so sick by then. He had days. What was I going to do, hand him that, on top of everything else? Her hands opened and closed. So I sat there, and I held his hand, and I let him die, thinking he was going to be a father, which was the last kind thing I ever did, and it is also the thing I have not been able to forgive myself for in 7 years. Silence, the kind that has a shape to it. "Who knows?" Wes said finally. "Nobody. Adrienne, nobody." She turned to him. "Not my mother, not Odette, and she's worked for me 11 years. Not a therapist because I never went to one. Not one human being on this earth has ever stood where you're standing right now. Why me? Because you're the only person who's asked me a question in 7 years, and then waited for the answer." And Wes Marsh, who had held it together in a funeral home, and a school pickup line, and a bank office, and 100 rooms where holding it together was the whole job, sat down on the hallway floor with his back against the wall. Right there. In a $40 million apartment, on the carpet. Adrienne stared at him. "What are you doing?" Sitting down. "Why?" "Because I'm not going to say anything useful," he said. "There isn't anything. There's no sentence for this, Adrienne. I looked for 4 years. So I'm just going to sit here." And she looked at him for about 3 seconds. And then Adrienne Vance, who ran 11 floors and $40 billion, slid down the wall on the opposite side of the hallway and sat on the floor across from him, with the light from that room falling out between them. And they sat there. 2 people. 2 stones. Same number. "Everybody assumes it's a shrine," she said eventually. "Whenever anyone finds out I have a room I don't go in, they assume it's full of his things. That's what I assumed. It's not his. That's the part I can't." She pressed her palm flat against her sternum. "It's not even a room about him. It's a room about somebody who never got a name." "Did you pick one?" She looked up sharply. Nobody had ever asked her that. "Yes," she said, and she didn't say what it was, and Wes didn't ask again, and that the not asking was possibly the kindest thing he did that entire year. At 12:20, they got up off the floor. She turned the light off. She left the door open. Not open wide, about 4 inches, but open. And they went back to the kitchen and stood at the counter, and neither of them touched the wine. And there was a moment Wes felt it arrive, like weather, when the whole thing tilted. Her hand was on the stone. His was 3 inches away. And he looked at that gap and thought about Wren asleep across town, and about a rabbit named Mr. Pockets, and about a woman 4 years in the ground, and about the notes in a dead man's handwriting that this woman still found in coat pockets. Adrienne. Don't. I wasn't going to. I know. She was looking at their 2 hands. That's why I said it. I'm scared, Wes said, and that stopped her. Of me, of tonight, of feeling like a person again instead of a machine that pours cereal. His voice went rough, because the last time I let myself feel like a person, I had a whole life, and a wife, and a future. And then a doctor said 11 weeks and it all just went. And I decided standing in that hallway that I was never going to hand anybody the power to take the floor out from under me again. How's that going? 4 years, he said. Perfect record, until Wednesday. Adrienne Vance looked at their hands on the counter. 3 inches. I'm scared too, she said, for all the same reasons. I paid it. I know exactly what it costs. So we don't do anything about it tonight. So we don't do anything about it tonight. She nodded slowly. Maybe 2 people who are that scared just stand in a kitchen and say the true thing out loud. And maybe that's enough for one night. Maybe that's more than either of us has done in years. It is. She almost laughed. It absolutely is. And Wesley Marsh did not take her hand, but he did not move his away either. He left it there. 3 inches. And that inch of not moving was the bravest thing he had done in 4 years. He drove home through an empty city at 1 in the morning, with his hand steady on the wheel, and his heart doing something reckless and warm and terrifying. And he was already planning it. Monday. The folder. The board. After Monday, she'd said in the doorway with her hand on his arm, after it's done, and it's safe. I'd like to do this again. And he'd said yes. He'd actually said yes. So here is what Wesley Marsh believed driving home that night that he had until Monday. That the weekend was going to be quiet. That the worst thing in his life was a folder in a bag on his passenger seat. Except 2 miles away, in a different part of the city, in an office on the 11th floor where the lights were still on at 1 in the morning, Gordon Sales was on the phone with a man from IT. And what he asked was very simple. He asked for the access logs. He asked who in project management had been pulling vendor contracts after hours. And when the answer came back, a name, a badge number, a timestamp at 11:47 on a Thursday night, Gordon Sales wrote it on a legal pad and underlined it twice, and then he made 3 more phone calls, and by Saturday afternoon he knew about the after-school program and the make and year of the car and the $58 a month and the balance in a checking account that had $40 in it until payday. And he knew about a 7-year-old girl with asthma. 6:52 on Monday morning. Wes Marsh had 2 eggs in a bowl and a fork in his hand and 13 minutes left before an alarm he never needed, and the phone on the counter lit up with a number he didn't know. He almost let it ring. He should have let it ring. He has thought about that 1,000 times since the fork in his hand, the yellow light over the stove, the exact half-second where he could have just let the thing go to voicemail and gone on being a man who did not yet know what he was about to know. He picked up. Wes, it's Gordon Sales. The fork went down on the counter. I hope it's not too early. Easy. Warm even. Figured a devoted single dad like yourself would be up with the kid. Gordon. I know. Ungodly hour. But I wanted to have this conversation before either of us gets to the office. Man to man. Before things get formal. And then on the other end of the line at 6:52 in the morning. Ice moving in a glass. Wes heard it. Small. Bright. Unmistakable. The man was drinking. I understand you've been doing some reading, Sales said. Vendor contracts. Very old vendor contracts. Ones nobody's had a reason to look at in years. Is that right? That's right. 11:47 on Thursday night, if we're being precise, which I like to be. A pause. So before you do something you can't take back, I thought you and I should talk about your daughter. And everything in Wes Marsh's kitchen went very, very quiet. You want to be careful, he said, low, about the next thing that comes out of your mouth. I'm not threatening your daughter, Wes. God, what kind of man do you think I am? He laughed, and the laugh was worse than a threat, because a threat is a man losing control. That laugh was a man who had never lost control in his life and was enjoying the morning. I'm concerned about her. There's a difference. See, I did some reading this weekend, too. Wren Marsh, 7 years old, asthmatic. Another small clink. That's a frightening thing, asthma in a kid. And her medication runs through your employer health plan, which runs through a job that, last I checked, was on a restructuring list I personally recommended. Wes didn't say anything. Now that list is on hold. Funny timing. Almost like somebody did somebody a favor. Gordon. So I got to thinking. A job like yours. It's a fragile thing. The voice went soft. Almost kind. About as fragile as a kid's lungs. All it takes is one performance review. One accusation, one complaint from a senior officer about an employee accessing confidential financial documents he was never authorized to touch. There it was, which is exactly what you did, isn't it? Wes's hand closed around the edge of the counter. That's a fireable offense, son. That's a walk-you-out-by-lunch offense, not a layoff, for cause. And I want you to understand what that means, because I don't think you do. For cause means no severance, no continuation coverage, nothing I can't quietly kill from my desk. The ice again, and that inhaler gets very, very expensive for a man with $40 in his checking account. And that was the one, because there is a specific temperature the human body reaches when a stranger says the balance of your bank account out loud on a Monday morning while your daughter is asleep down the hall. I'm the chief financial officer, Sales said pleasantly. I know things. Wes stared at the 2 eggs in the bowl. So here's what happens now. You go to the office. You take whatever you think you found, and you lose it. And when Vance asks whether project management identified any savings, you tell her. No. You looked, there's nothing there. There the 4 positions have to go after all. And in exchange, your name comes off that list. I'll see to it personally. And your daughter keeps breathing. A beat. It's just business, Wes. It's just numbers. You're a numbers guy, you understand. Daddy. Wes turned. Wren was in the doorway. Dinosaur pajamas, Mr. Pockets under one arm, rubbing an eye with the other fist. You're doing the face, she said sleepy. The money face. And Wes Marsh looked at his daughter. And then he spoke into the phone, and his voice was the calmest it had been all morning. Gordon, I'm going to make my daughter's breakfast now. And then I'm going to take her to school. And then I'm going to come into the office. He paused. You have a good morning. And he hung up. His hands were shaking so badly he had to set the phone down in 2 motions. He came around the counter and crouched. "Was that a bad phone call?" Wren asked. "That was a work phone call." "It looked bad." "It was a work phone call," he said again, "about grown-up money, and it is not your job. Your face was scared." And there it was. Because his daughter had her mother's chin and her mother's terrible gift for seeing straight through him. And there was no version of this where he got to lie to that face. So he didn't. "Wren, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to remember it for your whole entire life." "Okay." She nodded. Serious now. Rabbit clutched. "Sometimes a person is going to try to scare you into doing the wrong thing. And they're going to make it sound smart. They'll make the wrong thing sound easy, and the right thing sound dangerous." He tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. "And when that happens, you do the right thing anyway, even scared, especially scared. Because brave isn't not being scared, Bug. Brave is doing the right thing while you're terrified." She thought about it with the gravity that only 7-year-olds and Supreme Court justices possess. "Are you doing the right thing today?" "I'm going to try." "Are you terrified?" "Yeah," Wes said. "I really am." Wren considered this. Then she held out the rabbit. "You can take Mr. Pockets." And Wesley Marsh had to stand up very fast and go look in the refrigerator at nothing at all for about 4 seconds. "He'd get lonely at my office," he said when he could. "But that's the nicest thing anybody's offered me in a long time. Eat your eggs. We can't be late." Here is the thing he did not do on the drive in. He did not call Adrienne. He reached for the phone at the first red light and stopped. Reached again at the second one. Stopped again. Because Gordon Sales had known about the access log within 4 hours of it happening. Because Gordon Sales had known a checking balance that only 2 institutions on Earth had any business knowing. And because a man with that kind of reach was a man who had spent the entire weekend building a story. And Wes could see the story. Clearly. In detail. Disgruntled employee. About to be laid off. Hacks the finance files. Fabricates a smear against the officer who recommended the cut. Clean. Plausible. It doesn't even require anyone to like Gordon Sales. It only requires them to believe a desperate man might lie. And if Wes called her right now, if there was a 7-minute call from his phone to hers at 7:40 on a Monday morning, and Sales had any way of knowing about it, then Friday night stopped being 2 grieving people on a hallway floor. Then Friday night became evidence. So he didn't call. He did the thing he'd told a 7-year-old to do at 7 in the morning. He drove to the building, and he rode the elevator up, and he did the right thing, scared. 8:49. He went straight to the desk outside her office. Odette Pell, 58 years old, 11 years at that desk. Reading glasses on a chain, a cardigan the color of oatmeal, and a reputation for guarding that door, like something with teeth. "I need 5 minutes with her. Before the board. She's prepping. Odette." He leaned on the desk. "Please." And she looked at him over the glasses. And whatever was on his face must not have been the usual, because for once in 11 years Odette Pell did not argue. "Boardroom. She's already in there." She checked the clock. "You have 11 minutes. And Mr. Marsh." He was already moving. "Mr. Marsh." He stopped. "Whatever this is." Her voice had dropped. "She's been different for 5 days. I've worked for that woman for 11 years, and she has been different for 5 days. Is that a problem?" "It's the first good thing I've seen," Odette said, "since I started." Adrienne was standing at the head of the long table, with the folder open in front of her. She looked up, and for 1 second, her whole face opened. Friday night open. The kitchen, the hallway floor, the light falling out of a room nobody had ever seen. And then she saw his expression, and it shut into pure alertness. What? Gordon called me. 6:52 this morning. At my house. She didn't move. He knows I pulled the vendor contracts. He knows the exact timestamp. He's had the access log since Friday. Wes crossed to the table. He knows how much money is in my checking account. He knows about Wren's asthma. He knows her medication runs through the plan. Wes, he told me if I hand you that folder today, he'll have me fired for cause. Unauthorized access. No severance, no continuation coverage. And my daughter loses her medicine. Adrienne Vance went white. And then she went very, very still. The same stillness he'd seen Friday night when she read a name on page 3. The stillness of a woman doing arithmetic at speed. He's not wrong about the access, she said slowly. I know. Technically, you weren't authorized to be in those contracts. That's real. And if he frames it first, if he gets to the general counsel before I do, he'll say I'm a disgruntled employee who hacked the finance files to fabricate a smear. Yes, it's clean. It's very clean. She pressed 2 fingers to her temple. It's plausible, and it puts everything in that folder in doubt, because it makes you the criminal instead of him. So we're finished. No. Adrienne. No. She looked up. We're not. And something in her voice changed the room. Wes, Thursday night. What time did you first open the vendor files? 11:47. He said so himself. 11:47. She turned and hit the intercom. Odette, bring me the Thursday ticket. 12 seconds. Odette Pell came through that door with a single sheet of paper and the expression of a woman who had been waiting 11 years for somebody to finally ask her for something interesting. She set it down on the table. Wes looked at it, and the floor moved under him. Work order 4471, opened Thursday, 9:14 p.m., requested by A. Vance. Authorized scopeful division cost reduction analysis, including vendor and contract documentation. Assigned W, Marsh Project Management. Time-stamped, 2.5 hours before he ever opened a single file. You... Wes had to start over. You filed a work order. I filed a work order. On Thursday, before you knew. Before I knew anything. Adrienne's voice was perfectly level. You told me in a break room on Wednesday that you'd bring me a better answer by Friday. So on Thursday evening, I did what I have done every single time for 11 years I had Odette open a ticket. Because if I ask an employee to go looking somewhere unusual, that employee is covered. In writing. Before they go. Odette adjusted her glasses. I've opened 406 of them, she said. This one's just the first one anybody's ever needed. And she went back out and shut the door. Wes stood there, staring at a piece of paper. You covered me, he said, before you knew you'd have to. I cover everyone who works for me. Adrienne. It's the only decent thing about me. She said it lightly. It cost her something anyway. Now listen, because he'll be here in... She looked at the clock, 7 minutes, and he will walk through that door, believing he spent the weekend building a trap. He did build a trap. He built it around the wrong door. She leaned forward on the table. So here's what we do. We let him think it worked. What? When the board convenes, I'm going to open by asking project management for its cost reduction findings. That's you. And you're going to stand up in front of 11 people with Gordon Sales sitting right there, watching your face, and I'm going to say what he told me to say. You're going to say exactly what he told you to say." Wes let out a breath. "You want me to fold? I want you to look like you folded." And her eyes had gone somewhere cold and precise, and frankly a little frightening. Let him relax. Let him lean back in that chair with his coffee and his tan, and let him believe he scared a tired single father into burying it at 7 in the morning. And then I opened the folder. She smiled. It was terrible. And the last face Gordon Sales sees before his entire life ends is yours. When he realizes the man he threatened at dawn was never afraid of him at all. Wes looked at her for a long moment. "That's cold." "Yes. It's also—" He shook his head, and there was something like awe in it. "He threatened my kid Adrienne. He sat there drinking scotch at 6:52 in the morning and threatened a 7-year-old's lungs. I'm not going to pretend I want to be gentle about it." "Good," Adrienne said. "Neither do I." And then quieter, and it was not the CEO speaking. "Nobody threatens a child in my company and walks out of this building with his dignity. Nobody." Odette's voice came through the door. "They're coming up. 2 minutes." "Sit at the far end," Adrienne said fast. "Look like a man who lost." She caught his arm, the same place she'd touched him in a doorway on Friday night. "And Wes, whatever he says, however he looks at you, keep your face still. 4 years of practice." "That's what I'm counting on." 9 sharp. 11 of them came through the door, and Gordon Sales came in 4th, and he looked rested. That was the obscene part. He looked like a man who had slept 8 hours and eaten a hot breakfast and made 3 productive phone calls before 9. He set his coffee down halfway along the table, and his eyes went straight to the far end, straight to Wes, and Wes let him look. Wes let Gordon Sales see a defeated man. He slumped a half-inch. He didn't hold the eye contact. He looked down at the table like somebody carrying something heavy up a long flight of stairs. And out of the corner of his eye, he watched Gordon Sales see it, and understand it, and relax. Sales picked up his coffee, leaned back, crossed one ankle over a knee. He thought he'd won. "Let's begin," Adrienne said. She was standing at the head of the table, and there was not one trace of Friday night anywhere on her. "Before the merger post-mortem, I want to close the restructuring question. It's been hanging over that division for a week, and the people in it deserve an answer." She turned. "Gordon, 3 weeks ago you brought me a recommendation. 4 senior positions in project management. Is that still your recommendation?" Sales set the coffee down. "It is. Regrettably." He spread his hands. "I've looked at those numbers every way there is. The savings have to come from somewhere, and that division is the softest target we've got. Nobody wants to cut good people. But that's the job." "That's the job," Adrienne agreed. "That's the job." "Before I sign it, I asked project management to run its own analysis, to look for the savings somewhere other than 4 families. She turned to the far end of the table. "Mr. Marsh, you led that analysis." Every head turned. "What did you find?" And Gordon Sales turned too. Slow, easy, coffee in hand. And there was the smallest smile at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes said, "Go on, son. Do the smart thing. Protect your little girl." Wes looked down at the table. He let the silence stretch. He let Gordon Sales enjoy it. "I looked," Wes said. "Quiet, tired, beaten. I went through the whole division budget, every project, every line." "And," Adrienne said. And Wes lifted his eyes, and looked directly at Gordon Sales, and held it, and I found 4 times the savings we needed. the room stopped. In a single vendor contract, routed through a consulting company whose registered address is a dental practice in a strip mall, owned by the son-in-law of a member of this board. Nobody breathed. Gordon Sales's smile did not move for one entire second. It just sat there on his face, a smile with nothing behind it, while his brain caught up to what his ears had already heard. And then it came off all at once, and the color went with it. Adrienne. His voice had changed completely. Whatever this employee is about to... Sit down, Gordon. He accessed confidential files. He was half out of his chair now, pointing down the table. He is not authorized to be anywhere near vendor contracts. This is a disgruntled employee on a layoff list, and he has fabricated he was authorized. She slid a single sheet of paper down the polished table. It traveled the whole length and stopped in front of him. Work order 4471, opened by my office Thursday evening at 9:14. Full division cost analysis, including vendor documentation. 2.5 hours before Mr. Marsh opened a single file. She let it sit. So the access is clean, which means the only question left in this room is why a member of this board has been billing the company he is sworn to protect through his son-in-law's dental office for 6 years, at nearly 4 times the salary cost of the 4 people he wanted to fire, in order to hide it. Those are legitimate vendor. Then explain the address. Silence. And into that silence, Wes Marsh spoke, quietly, so that every person at that table had to be still to hear it. You called my house this morning. 11 heads turned. 6:52. You told me if I brought this folder in today, you'd have me fired for cause and cut off my daughter's health insurance. His voice didn't rise once. My daughter has asthma. She's 7 years old. You threatened her medication over a glass of scotch before 7 in the morning. He let it land. You want to talk about a disgruntled employee. I want everyone at this table to understand that the chief financial officer of this company called a single father at dawn and threatened to take an inhaler away from a sick kid to cover his own theft. He sat back. That's the man telling you I fabricated something. And the board stared at Gordon Sales. All 11 of them. And Wes watched the thing happen that Adrienne had promised him would happen. Watched Sales understand fully, and finally that the sad man at the end of the table had never been afraid of him for 1 single second. That the slump was bait. That he had walked into this room congratulating himself on a trap he had sprung on nobody. 6 weeks, the email had said. It turned out he'd had 5 days. Gordon Sales set down his coffee. And then he did something Wes had not planned for. He smiled again. Well, he said, that was very good. And he reached down beside his chair and came up with a briefcase. Before you call the lawyers, Adrienne and I assume Odette already has. I'd like to enter something into the record. He set a folder on the table. It was thick, much thicker than Wes's. I've been keeping this for 2 years. Gordon. Adrienne's voice was flat. Whatever you think. 26 months, actually. And I'll tell you honestly, I hoped I would never have to open it. He opened it. Item 1, March of last year. You left the Ardmore Quarterly Review after 9 minutes. Your assistant told 3 people you had a headache. You were observed in the 14th floor stairwell for 40 minutes. Wes felt the temperature of the room change. Item 4, October. Your office door locked from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. No meetings scheduled. Calls routed. Item 9, and this one I did not enjoy. Writing down a member of the cleaning staff reported that you had been crying at your desk. That was a Tuesday. Item 15. Stop. The 8th of August, every year, for 6 years, you have taken the day off. Every year, the same day. And nobody in this company has ever known why. And Adrian Vance did not move, but Wes saw it. Wes, who had spent 4 years learning to read a face because reading faces was all he had left, Wes saw her hand come off the edge of the table and disappear below it. Because August 8th was the Tuesday. August 8th was a hospital bathroom 2 floors down from a man who had days left. Gordon. The voice came from the far end of the table. An older woman, silver-haired, who had not said one word all morning. What exactly is this? This, Sales said, is a pattern. And I'm not enjoying it, Winifred. I want that on the record, too. He closed the folder. I am formally requesting that this board convene a fitness review under Article 9. Because the chief executive of this company has never recovered from the death of Emmett Thorne, and everybody in this room has known it for 7 years, and everybody in this room has been too polite to say it out loud. He looked around the table. She pursued a merger with his family for 8 months. 8 months against the advice of finance. Against my advice in writing 4 separate times. And when it collapsed, she cleared this boardroom by physical intimidation. He turned his palms up. And then, 5 days later, an employee on her own layoff list produces a folder that removes me. And nobody said anything. Not one of them. 11 people around a long table, and not one of them said a word. Because they had all thought it. Every one of them, at some point in 7 years in a hallway or a car or over a drink, had said some version of, "She's never been right since." And now a man had said it out loud in a room with a stenographer, and there was nothing to push against. Because the ugliest weapons are always built out of things everybody already believes. Wes started to stand, and Adrian Vance said, without looking at him, in a voice like a wire pulled tight, "Don't. Adrian, don't." Because if the man from the 14th floor stood up to defend her right now in front of this board, 5 days after his name came off a layoff list, it would prove every single word. So Wesley Marsh sat back down and did the hardest thing he had done in 4 years, which was nothing. The review will convene in 90 days, Gordon Sales said, buttoning his jacket. I'll accept suspension in the meantime. I'd suggest you consider the same. And he walked out, and the door swung shut. And 11 people looked at the floor. 90 days. That's what a fitness review buys you. 90 days of a woman being studied like a specimen by people who used to ask her for money. And Wes Marsh spent the first 4 of those days doing something he was uniquely miserably qualified for. Waiting, because he couldn't call her. Not from his phone, not from the building. Every instinct he had said the moment he made this about the 2 of them. Gordon Sales won, and Sales was suspended, but Sales was not gone, and a suspended man with a lawyer has nothing but time. So Wes went to work, and answered emails, and picked up his daughter at 7:15. And on the 5th day, Odette Pell walked past his desk without stopping, and set a post-it note down beside his keyboard, face down. The way you'd deal a card. 4 words. She isn't eating. Fix it. He found Simone Adeyemi crying in a stairwell, which was not what he'd gone looking for. He'd gone looking for a quiet place to make a phone call, and instead, there she was, 24 years old, sitting on the concrete steps between 11 and 12, with her badge in her hand like she was already thinking about handing it in. He'd stayed 20 minutes late for this kid once, months ago. A formatting error on a report due at 5. She'd been terrified, and he'd fixed it, and told her to go home. Simone. She looked up and her face did something awful. "Don't," she said. "Please don't be nice to me." "Okay. I mean it." "Okay. I'll be neutral." He sat down 2 steps below her, which put him lower than she was, because he had learned somewhere that people confess more easily when you are not above them. "What's the trouble?" And she made a sound like a laugh that had gone bad. "You're going to hate me." "Probably not." "You will." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist. "The folder. His folder. The one about her." And the stairwell got very cold. "Simone." "Item 9, she said. The cleaning staff didn't report that she was crying at her desk. I did. Wes did not move. I didn't know what it was for. I swear to God, Wes, he said it was a wellness review. He said HR was building a support file. He said the company was worried about her." Her voice cracked open. "He asked me questions for 2 years. In the elevator. In the cafeteria. Little ones. Did she seem tired? Did you see what time she left? And I answered them because he was the CFO, and I was 22, and he was nice to me. Why'd you keep answering?" And that's when she stopped. And Wes watched a 24-year-old decide whether to say the true thing to a man on a stairwell. "I have a lot of student debt," Simone said, "and my mother has MS. And in March he moved me onto the retention list. Off the layoff list, onto the retention list. He didn't ask me for anything in exchange. He just showed me. He showed me the list, and my name was on the good side of it, and then he asked me how Ms. Vance seemed lately." She put her face in her hands, and I answered. Wes sat on that concrete step and thought about a phone call at 6:52 in the morning. Your daughter keeps breathing. Everybody wins. Same man, same move. Find the thing a person cannot afford to lose, and then stand very close to it. The only difference was that Wes had been 35 and had already lost everything once, and this girl was 24 and hadn't. "Look at me," he said. She didn't. "Simone, look at me." She did. "Do you know what he offered me 4 months ago? He offered me my daughter's asthma medication. That was the price. Bury the folder. Keep her inhaler." Simone stared. "And I want you to hear this part, because it's the part that matters. I almost took it. You didn't. I almost did. I sat in my kitchen with my hand on a bowl of eggs, and I did the math on whether my kid's lungs were worth a stranger's company. That's not a hero, Simone. That's just a man who happened to land on the right side of an equation at 10 minutes to 7 in the morning." She was crying properly now. "So no, I don't hate you." He stood up. "But you're going to have to decide something in the next 90 days, and it's going to be the biggest thing you've ever decided, and I'm not going to make it easier by telling you what it is. Wes, you already know what it is." And he went back up the stairs. The bad part came in week 6, and it came from the direction he wasn't watching, which is always how it comes. Because Wes Marsh had gotten very good at guarding against catastrophe. 4 years of practice. He guarded the rent, the insurance, the car, the after-school program, the $58 a month. He guarded the way a man guards who has already had the floor removed once and has decided it will never happen again. What he did not guard against was himself. Wren's pediatrician wanted a specialist. Not urgently. That's the phrase she used, and Wes has replayed that phrase in his head more times than any other 4 syllables in the English language. Not urgently. The overnight study, the full workup, the plan covered a fraction of it, and a fraction of a very large number is still a very large number. And Adrienne offered. They were in her kitchen. It was a Tuesday. She had made pasta badly, and they had eaten it anyway, and Wren was at home with Mrs. Okonkwo, and Adrian said it very carefully, the way you set down something breakable. "Let me pay for it." And Wes Marsh said no. "Wes, no. It's not a large amount of money to me. I know exactly what it is." He set down his fork. "I know it to the dollar. I have known it to the dollar for 11 days. "Then why?" "Because I'm not a charity case, Adrienne." And the second it left his mouth, he heard it. Which is the worst part. He heard it, and he did not take it back. "That is not what this is." "I know. Say the actual reason." And he couldn't. Not that night. Not for another 8 days. Because the actual reason was this, and it lived somewhere under his ribs where he'd never had to say it out loud. If she paid, then she was the woman with money, and he was the man with the sick kid. And every single thing he had built in 4 years, every 3 a.m., every skipped dinner, every $58 became a story about a lucky widower who got picked up by a billionaire. He had let a man threaten his daughter, and he had not folded. And here he was folding over a check. "I'll figure it out," he said. "I'll pick up the contract work. 2 months 3 at the outside." 3 months. "It's not urgent. They said it's not urgent." And Adrienne Vance looked at him across her own counter for a long moment. "Okay," she said. She should have fought him. She has said since that it is the one thing she would take back out of all of it. But she was 6 weeks into a fitness review and 40 pounds of paperwork, and she had spent 7 years learning that when a person puts up a wall, you respect it. So she said okay. And 9 days later, at 2 in the morning, Wren Marsh could not get air. He has almost no memory of the drive. He remembers the sound. That's what he remembers. Not a cough. A cough would have been fine. It was the other sound, the thin, high one, at the top of the breath, the one that means the air is going through something narrower than it should. He remembers her hand on his shirt in the elevator. He remembers a nurse taking her out of his arms and saying, "Sir, I need you to let go," and how his fingers would not obey. And then he remembers a hallway, because that's what hospitals are when you strip everything else away. They are hallways. And Wesley Marsh had stood in one before 4 years ago at 3 in the morning and made a set of rules. He sat down on a plastic chair against the wall, and he took out his phone, and he looked at it for a full minute without doing anything, because there was a name in it. If he touched that name, he would be admitting something he had spent 4 years not admitting. He touched it. She answered on the second ring. "Wizzer, I need ya," and it stopped. His throat just stopped working. "Where are you?" "St. Bren." He had to breathe. "St. Brendan's. Emergency." She couldn't. 20 minutes. She was there in 14, and she did not say "I told you." She did not say "I offered." She did not say one single word about money then or ever, which Wes did not understand until much later, when he understood that a woman who had once sat by a dying man's bed and chosen not to tell him something knows exactly what it costs to swallow a true sentence for somebody else's sake. She sat down on the plastic chair next to his, and after about 10 minutes, Wes Marsh said to the floor, "I did this." "No, I had a way to fix it in September." And I said no, because of pride, because I didn't want to be the guy who, Wes. She's 7, Adrienne. She's 7 years old, and she couldn't breathe in my kitchen, and the reason is that her father needed to feel like a man. And Adrienne Vance did not comfort him. She did not tell him it wasn't his fault, because it partly was, and she was not a liar. What she said was, "Then don't do it again." He looked up. That's the whole thing, she said. You don't get to fix September. You get to not do it in March. Her voice was very steady. Refusing help is not strength. I know because I turned it into a $40 billion company, and it cost me 7 years, and a room I couldn't walk into. You just cost your daughter a night. That's a hell of a thing to say to a man in a hospital. You'd say it to me. And he almost laughed. Because she was right. He absolutely would have. At 4:40. In the morning, a doctor came out and said the words, "She's fine. She's sleeping. We'll keep her till noon." And Wesley Marsh put his face in his hands and cried in a hallway for the first time in 4 years. And Adrienne Vance put her hand flat on his back and left it there, and did not say a single word. Coralie Whitcomb arrived the next afternoon, 68 years old, Josephine's mother, Wren's grandmother, 2 flights and a rental car, and she came through those hospital doors with a cardigan over one arm and an expression Wes had seen exactly once before at a funeral and had hoped never to see again. She hugged her granddaughter for a long time. Then she found Wes in the corridor. "Who's the woman in the waiting room?" "Coralie. Wesley. Her name is Adrienne." "I know her name. It's on the side of your building." Her jaw set. "Everybody in this hospital knows her name. A nurse asked me if I wanted a picture." "It's not. My daughter has been dead 4 years." And that stopped him. Cold. 4 years and 2 months, Coralie said. And her little girl is in an oxygen mask, and there's a stranger in the waiting room, and I flew here in the middle of the night, Wes. Her voice broke, and she hauled it back. "So don't tell me what it isn't. What are you asking me?" "I'm asking if Wren would be better off in Ohio." And there it was, out loud. In a hospital corridor. With me. In a house. With a yard. And a grandmother who is home at 3 o'clock every single day, instead of a father working 2 jobs, so he can pay for a specialist he could have had in September. Wes went very still. "How do you know about September?" "Because Wren told me," Coralie said. "On the phone, 3 weeks ago. She said Daddy's working extra because of the doctor." And Wesley Marsh had nothing. Not one word. They found each other in the cafeteria at 9 that night. 2 women. 1 table. Bad coffee in styrofoam. And Coralie Whitcomb, who had buried a daughter, sat across from Adrienne Vance, who ran 11 floors and $40 billion, and said, "I don't like this." "I know. I want to be clear. I don't dislike you. I don't know you. I dislike this." "I know. My daughter's name was Josephine." Coralie's hands were around the cup. Everybody called her Josie, except her mother. She made a lemon cake that people asked for at church. She could not parallel park to save her life. She laughed at her own jokes before she got to the end of them. She looked up. "And in about 6 years, nobody's going to say any of that out loud in that apartment, because you'll be there, and it'll be awkward, and people will stop." And Adrienne Vance set down her coffee. "Mrs. Whitcomb, may I tell you something I've never told anyone, except your son-in-law? All right. 7 years ago, I was engaged to a man named Emmett Thorne. He was diagnosed on a Thursday, and he was dead in 10 weeks and 4 days. Her voice was completely level. "And I was 11 weeks pregnant when he got sick. And I lost the baby on the 8th of August in a bathroom 2 floors below his room, and I went back upstairs and I sat by his bed and I did not tell him. And he died, believing he was going to be a father." Coralie Whitcomb did not move. "There is a room in my apartment I did not open for 7 years. There is wallpaper in it that stops 3/4 of the way up a wall." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're afraid I'm going to erase your daughter," Adrienne said. And I need you to understand that I have spent 7 years being erased. Nobody says Emmett's name to me. Not one person in 7 years has said his name out loud in a room I was in because it's awkward, and people stop. She leaned forward. So I'll tell you exactly what I am and what I am not. Josephine's place is hers. Permanently. I am not asking for it. I have never wanted it. And if I thought for 1 second that being in that apartment made her smaller in it, I would get in my car tonight, and you would never hear from me again. Then what are you doing? Making room. That's all. And if you tell me no, I'll still make sure that child sees a specialist by the end of the month, because that has nothing to do with me and everything to do with her lungs. Coralie Whitcomb sat in a hospital cafeteria at 9 o'clock at night and looked at this woman for a long, long time. Say her name, she said. I'm sorry. My daughter. Say her name. Josephine. Again. Josephine Marsh. And Coralie Whitcomb's face came apart, because nobody had said it. Not the neighbors, not the church, not her own husband, before he passed. 4 years, and everyone had been so careful and so kind and so quiet that a woman's name had simply gone out of the world. She reached into her purse, and she took out an index card, soft at the corners, in blue ballpoint, in a young woman's handwriting. It's her lemon cake, Coralie said. You'll need the buttermilk. Everybody skips the buttermilk. Adrienne Vance took it in both hands like it was made of glass. I'm not giving you my daughter, Coralie said. I know. I'm giving you the cake. I understand. And Wren says the icing's too sweet, so you cut the sugar by 1/3, and you don't tell anyone I said so. The fitness review convened on the 89th day. Conference room on 12, not the boardroom, which Wes understood was deliberate. They'd moved it off her floor the way you move a patient out of their own home. 11 board members. Outside counsel. A stenographer. And Gordon Sales in a new suit with a folder that had gotten thicker. He was good. That's what nobody wants to hear about men like him. He was measured and reluctant and sorrowful, and he never once raised his voice, and by 10:40 he had walked that room through 26 months of documented instability, and by 11:15 Wes could feel it going. Because you could see it happening on their faces. Not hostility. Worse, sympathy. 11 people arranging their expressions into the specific, gentle pity of a jury that has already decided and is now just waiting politely for the defense to finish so they can be kind about it. And Adrienne Vance sat at the end of that table and did not defend herself. She had told Wes she wouldn't. The moment I explain August 8th to 11 strangers, he wins. He gets to make my worst day into an exhibit. So she said nothing. And they were going to take her company. Except, Wes Marsh had spent 9 weeks doing the only thing he had ever been good at. Paying attention. And here is what he had noticed in 9 weeks of sitting through meetings. Nobody thought he mattered in every single one of those rooms at the far end of the table. There was a woman named Winifred Osgood, 71 years old. 30 years on that board, she'd been appointed by Adrienne's predecessor, and then just stayed. Widowed, quiet, cardigans. She never used the tablet they issued her. She never spoke unless directly asked, and she was directly asked approximately never. And she wrote, by hand, in a small hardback notebook, the entire meeting, every meeting, and nobody, not one person in that building in 30 years, had ever asked her what she was writing. Wes had asked, 3 days earlier, on her porch. with a bakery box because his mother-in-law had taught him that you do not knock on a 71-year-old woman's door empty-handed. "Mrs. Osgood, I'm Wes Marsh. I work on 14. I know who you are, young man. You're the one who found the dentist." "Yes, ma'am." "Come in. It's cold." And 40 minutes later, he had said, "Do you still have them?" And Winifred Osgood had looked at him over her glasses and said, "Do I still have them? Mr. Marsh, I have every notebook I have filled since March of 1994. They're in the hall closet in date order, and I do not expect a soul on this earth to believe that. So you'd better come look." At 11:22, outside counsel said, "Unless there's anything further," and a voice from the far end of the table said, "There is." Every head turned. Winifred Osgood set her purse on the table and began, without hurrying, to take out notebooks. 1, 2, 4, 9. She stacked them in front of her in a tower while a room full of people who had spoken over her head for 30 years watched in complete silence. "Mr. Sales, item 9 of your file. The cleaning staff report. You have it dated the 14th of October. "That's correct." "It is not." She opened a notebook without looking for the page. "On the 14th of October, Ms. Vance chaired the capital allocation meeting from 9 until 4:40. I was in it. You were in it. You spoke for 11 minutes about a warehouse in Dayton, and I wrote down that you said, 'frankly,' 6 times because I count things when I'm bored." Somebody down the table made a sound. Item 4, October. Office door locked 11 to 4, no meetings scheduled, calls routed. Another notebook. That was the second Thursday. The building fire panel failed at 10:40, and the 14th floor was evacuated to the plaza until 3:30. There were no meetings scheduled because there was no building. I have the time in the margin. I also have that it was raining and that Ms. Vance gave her coat to a temp from accounts payable. Gordon Sales's mouth had come slightly open. Item 15. Winifred Osgood folded her hands. The 8th of August, 6 years running. "Winifred, I have no idea what happens to that woman on the 8th of August, she said. "And do you know why? Because I never asked her. Which I will regret, I think, for whatever time I have left. But you didn't ask either, Mr. Sales. You just wrote it down 6 times. And you saved it." She closed the notebook. "That's not a fitness review. That's a scrapbook." And then Winifred Osgood said the thing that Wesley Marsh would repeat to his daughter, and eventually to his daughter's daughter, for the rest of his life. 30 years, she said. I have sat at the end of this table while you gentlemen talked over the top of my head. 30 years, and not one of you ever once asked me what I was writing. She looked around the room. That young man on 14 asked me, last Tuesday, on my own porch. Silence. "And that is exactly what happens," Winifred Osgood said, "when you decide who is worth looking at twice." They voted at 11:51. It wasn't close. And when the doors opened, Simone Adeyemi was standing in the corridor outside with a printed email in her hand, and her chin trembling, and her badge still clipped to her jacket, and she said to outside counsel, in a voice that cracked twice, "I need to give a statement about how item 9 was collected." And Wes Marsh, walking out, put his hand on her shoulder for exactly 1 second, and did not stop, and did not say anything at all. Because she'd figured out what the decision was, just like he said she would. Gordon Sales left the building at 12:20 with a box he was not permitted to carry himself, and in the elevator lobby, he stopped in front of Wes. "You should have taken the deal." "I know. You had $40 and a sick kid." His voice had gone thin. "Any smart man folds." and Wesley Marsh looked at him. "That's the difference between us, Gordon," he said. "You thought $40 and a sick kid was the reason I'd fold." He picked up his coffee. "It's the only reason I've ever stood up." That night, in an apartment that still had almost nothing in it, Adrienne Vance stood in her hallway with her hand flat against a door that had been open 4 inches for 94 days. Wren was asleep in the guest room. First time. Mr. Pockets under her chin, and Adrienne turned around and held out her hand, and in it was a key. Small, brass, worn shiny on one side from 7 years in the bottom of a drawer. "There's a room you haven't seen," she said. "Adrienne, I've seen it." "No." Her voice was doing something strange. "There's another one." The key was for a storage unit. That's the thing. Nobody would have guessed. Not a safe deposit box, not a house upstate, not some tasteful vault where a rich woman keeps the artifacts of a rich woman's grief. A storage unit, off the state route, between a tire shop and a place that sold above-ground pools. "Unit 214, Adrienne said in the car, with both hands on the wheel, which she almost never did because she almost never drove. $94 a month, automatic withdrawal, since the November after he died. Wes did the arithmetic before he could stop himself. Because that's what he does. That's the whole architecture of the man. Adrienne, that's 84 months. 85 next week. You've paid 84 months on a unit you've never opened. 2,556 times I talked myself out of it, she said. You want to know when I started counting the night you sat down on my hallway floor. And he didn't say anything to that, because he had his own number, and it was $58 a month, and it had gone out of his account on the 4th of every month for 4 years, to a hospital billing department for a woman who no longer existed. 2 people. 2 standing orders, both of them paying month after month into the past. The unit smelled like cold metal and cardboard. She lifted the door herself, and it went up with that long corrugated roar, and the light from the walkway went in about 8 feet and quit. Boxes. Not many, 15 maybe. Labeled in a man's handwriting, which meant he'd labeled them himself, which meant he'd packed them himself, which meant he'd known. Kitchen, records, books keep, books donate. And one that said in the same hand, a "Don't open this one alone." Adrienne made a small sound. He knew, she said. He knew I'd put it all in a box and pay a bill and never come. Do you want me to? No. She got down on her knees on that concrete floor in a wool coat that cost more than Wes's car, and she opened it herself. Inside was a jacket. Brown corduroy worn white at the elbows, the kind of jacket a woman like Adrienne Vance would have found embarrassing in public and defended to the death in private. She put it on. It swallowed her. And Wes stood in the doorway of a storage unit off a state route and watched a 41-year-old woman put both hands in the pockets of a dead man's coat, the way you do, when you already know what you're going to find. She went still. Wes. He came, folded once, blue ballpoint, 4 lines. If anything ever happens to me, don't you dare turn to stone. Promise me you'll let somebody in. Don't waste all that love just because I'm not there to catch it. And under it, smaller, like an afterthought, proud of you. Always. Adrienne Vance sat down on the concrete floor of Unit 214 with that piece of paper in both hands. 7 years, she said. I know. I broke it. Every single day. On purpose. She was crying and furious about it the way she'd been crying and furious about it in a break room a lifetime ago. I read this a year after he died. in a coat pocket. And I read it, and I thought, no. No, Emmett. You don't get to make me do that. You don't get to leave and then tell me to open the door. So you built a company? I built a company so I would never have a free afternoon to drive out here. She laughed, wet and broken. $40 billion, Wes. Do you understand what that is? That's just a very expensive way of not having 20 minutes. And Wesley Marsh sat down on the concrete next to her. Same move he'd made on a hallway floor 13 months earlier. It was the only one he had. And he did not say he'd forgive you. He didn't say he'd be proud. He had 4 years of practice in what not to say to a person on a floor. What he said was $58 a month. She looked up. Josie's hospital bill. I finished paying it 14 months ago. He was looking straight ahead at a stack of boxes. And I never canceled the transfer. I just moved it to a savings account. Same day, same amount, same everything. Because if I canceled it, that would be the last thing that still had her name on it. What are you saving for? Nothing, Wes said. That was the point. And then, after a while, until about 3 months ago, Adrienne Vance turned her head, and Wes Marsh looked at the boxes and did not look at her, and neither of them said one more word about it for another 2 months. They painted the room in April, not tore it out, not left it. Nobody said the word nursery, and nobody said the word shrine. And if you had asked either of them what the plan was, they could not have told you. Wren decided. She stood in the doorway on a Saturday morning in a t-shirt with a shark on it, and looked at 3/4 of a wall of pale yellow wallpaper, stopping mid-roll and said, "This room's not sad, it's just dark." And Adrienne Vance, who had not been able to make a decision about that room in 7 years, said, "What?" "The blinds down." Wren walked in and yanked the cord, and the whole thing came up crooked, and light hit that floor for the first time since a Tuesday in August, 7 years earlier. See not sad, dark. Wes stood in the hallway with a hand over his mouth. "What color would you paint it?" Adrienne said, carefully. "Am I allowed to say? You're the only person who's allowed to say." And Wren Marsh considered the question with the gravity of a woman appraising a horse. "Green," she said. "Not the throw-up green. The other one." They bought the other one. The crib in the flat box went to a family shelter downtown, still taped, still sealed, and Adrienne carried it down to the car herself, and would not let anyone help her, and stood in the parking garage for a minute afterward, with her hands on the roof of the car, and then got in and drove them to lunch. The stuffed elephant with the ribbon stayed. It sits on the window sill of that room to this day, next to a lamp shaped like a mushroom, and every so often a guest asks about it, and the answer depends entirely on who is asked. Wren's answer was always the best one. "That's for the baby who didn't get to come," she'd say. "We keep her stuff." She turned 8 in October. Adrienne threw the party in the not-empty apartment with a cake she baked herself and slightly burned, and served anyway, and it was the best birthday of Wren Marsh's life. And there was one Sunday that November that nearly took the whole thing down, because it was never smooth. Nobody should tell you it was smooth. Adrienne made a pasta badly. The woman could read a balance sheet in the dark, and could not boil water without smoke. And the alarm went off, and Wes was waving a dish towel at the ceiling, and Wren, who had been in a mood all afternoon for reasons no adult would ever learn, said, "You're not my mom." The alarm stopped. "You can't even cook. My mom could cook." And she left, down the hall, door. Wes started after her furious and gutted in the exact proportions only a parent knows. Adrienne caught his arm. Let me. Adrienne, I know what she's doing. Very quiet. She's finding out whether I leave when she's awful. You don't have to. Everybody's always left when she was awful. Or she believes they have, which is the same thing at 8. Her hand tightened. I ran a company for 7 years so I would never have to sit in a room with somebody who might reject me. I'm done doing that. Let me go sit in the room. And Wesley Marsh, who did not let anybody take over with his daughter, ever not once in 4 years let go of her arm. He heard the knock. He heard go away. He heard Adrienne Vance not go away. And then a door, and then 2 voices for 20 minutes, one small and furious, and one steady. And he could not make out a single word, and he did not try. When they came out, Wren's hand was in hers, and both their faces were wrecked. I said sorry, Wren announced, ashamed, chin out. V says Mom sounds like she was a really good cook, and she wishes she could have learned from her. Wes looked at Adrienne over his daughter's head, and Adrienne shook her head slightly, which meant not now, and maybe not ever, because some conversations belong to the 2 people who had them. For now, Wren said with tremendous dignity, she can be the lady who's bad at pasta. For now, Adrienne agreed. For now is enough, Wes said, and his voice wasn't quite right either. For now is more than enough, V. That's what the nickname was. She never asked for it, and Wren never explained it, and Adrienne Vance received it the first time, like a woman being handed a medal in a foreign country. And the apartment stopped being empty in the way apartments do, which is to say, all at once, and then you can't remember what it looked like before. A drawing on the refrigerator. First thing ever, stuck to that refrigerator in 6 years. Then a framed photograph. The 3 of them in a red booth at a diner off 9th Milkshakes, Mr. Pockets, propped up against the napkin dispenser like a 4th party to the meeting. Then a spare toothbrush. Then a plant, which Adrienne killed. Then a second plant, which Adrienne also killed. Then a third plant, which survived exclusively because an 8-year-old stood over her with a watering can and the expression of a small, stern foreman, and said not that much, V. That's how you drowned Kevin. The plants had names. Obviously the plants had names, and the building noticed before Wes did, because the Ice Queen started saying good morning. She learned the names of the cleaning staff, and then the names of their kids. The blinds in that corner office stayed open, now always, and she left at 6 most nights. Actually went home to a life instead of hiding from the absence of one. Odette Pell cornered him by the elevators in June. I don't know what you did. I don't want to know. Her voice was fierce and low. But she asked how my mother was doing. 11 years, Mr. Marsh. 11 years at that desk, and she never once knew I had a mother. Her eyes were suspiciously bright. Whatever you did, don't stop. Coralie Whitcomb came for Thanksgiving. She flew in on the Tuesday, and she stood in the doorway of an apartment worth more than her entire town. And she said, well, it's very clean. And Adrienne Vance said, it wasn't until about 6 months ago. And that was the whole negotiation. That was it. They made the lemon cake together on Wednesday night. Buttermilk, sugar cut by 1/3. And Coralie stood at that counter and talked for 2 hours about a girl who couldn't parallel park and laughed at her own jokes before the end of them. And nobody in that kitchen went quiet. Nobody changed the subject. Nobody looked at the floor. Adrienne asked questions. What was she like at 14? Did she always want kids? Was she funny on purpose or by accident? And Coralie Whitcomb answered them, and and at some point looked up and realized she had been talking about her daughter out loud for 2 straight hours for the first time in 4 years. She had to sit down. "Nobody asks," she said. "I know," Adrienne said. "They think they're being kind. They think they're being kind." And the two of them stood in that kitchen with flour on their hands, and did not say anything else for a while because there wasn't anything else, because sometimes the entire conversation is, "I know." Wes carried the ring for 11 days. He'd bought it with his own money, which mattered to him more than he was ever able to explain to anybody. Adrienne could have bought a stone the size of a walnut and not felt it leave the account, which was exactly the point. $58 a month. The same standing transfer. The one with a dead woman's name on it moved to savings saved for nothing until 3 months in, when it stopped being for nothing. 11 days he carried it, because every time he decided the moment was right, his nerve went. Wesley Marsh, who had faced down Gordon Sales across a boardroom table without blinking, was undone by one small question. He told Wren first. Obviously, he told Wren first. He had not made a decision without her in 4 years, and he was not going to start with this one. Bug, grown-up question. I need you to think about it like a grown-up. She sat up in bed, Mr. Pocket in her lap. Is it about V? It's about V. Finally, Dad. She gave him a look he was going to be receiving for the next 30 years. It's been a year. Okay, listen. He took a breath. I want to ask V to marry us. Not just me. Us. To stay. Officially. Forever. And then because it mattered more than the rest of it. And if you say no, I put it away, and it's just the two of us. And that's a good life. That's a great life. And I will never once make you feel bad about it. Wren was quiet for a long moment. She picked up the rabbit and held it in both hands. When Mom died, she said slowly, I thought our family got broke. Like a plate. And you can glue a plate, but everybody can still see the crack. Yeah. But V didn't glue us. She frowned working at it 8 years old and reaching for something enormous. It's like we were a family with an empty chair. And she didn't try to sit in Mom's chair. She brought her own chair. Wes couldn't speak. And now there's more chairs than there used to be. Not less. She looked up. More chairs is better than an empty one. He had to look at the wall for a second. That, he said when he could, might be the smartest thing anybody has ever said. So yes. She held up one finger. Her mother's finger. That stubborn 8 going on 40 gesture. But I want to be there. And Mr. Pockets wants to be there. And I get to tell her about the chairs. You get to tell her about the chairs. I did it where it started. 13 months and 11 days after a joke in a hallway on a Saturday morning on the 14th floor of an empty building. He told her he'd left something at the office. She came because they did everything together now, and Wren came because Wren came everywhere, vibrating with the physical effort of holding a secret humming loudly and looking at the ceiling. Down the corridor, past the break room, and Wes stopped at the spot. The exact spot. He'd paced it off. He knew where it was. Do you know where we're standing? He said. Adrienne looked around, and Wes watched it arrive on her face, watched her recognize the window, the ledge she'd set a wine glass down on, the stretch of industrial carpet between. This is where I made the worst joke of my life. I said, maybe you should just marry me. His voice caught, and he pushed through it. Then nobody would dare pressure you again. I remember every word, Adrienne said. She had gone very still. I remember I couldn't speak. You were the first person in 7 years who'd offered me something without wanting anything back, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with it, and I couldn't get a single word out. So you took my hand. I took your hand. And you didn't say anything. He shook his head, and it terrified me, because I didn't understand yet that a person can say the biggest thing there is with no words at all. And Wesley Marsh went down on one knee on the industrial carpet of a 14th floor hallway. Wren made a small sound and clapped both hands over her mouth. So here's what I finally understand. He got the box open. That day I was joking. I was hiding behind a joke because that's what I do, because I was too scared to want anything real. He held it up. Small, honest, bought $58 at a time. This time I mean every single word. No joke, no hiding. Marry me, marry us. Wes, not because you're lonely. Not because I'm lonely. His voice broke all the way open, and he let it. Because we're not anymore. We did the saving already. In a boardroom and a hospital hallway, and on the floor of a storage unit off the state route. He looked at his daughter. And because somebody's got something to tell you. And Wren Marsh stepped forward with Mr. Pockets under one arm, and looked up at V, at the lady who was bad at pasta and got better, who killed 2 plants and saved the 3rd, who sat up 2 nights in a chair at St. Brendan's, who walked down a hallway and knocked on a door and did not go away. When my mom died, Wren said in a clear, brave 8-year-old voice, our table had an empty chair, and it made everything sad. Adrienne's hand came up over her mouth. But you didn't sit in Mom's chair. No, Adrienne said. I never would. You brought your own. Wren's chin did the thing. The stubborn thing handed down from a woman she barely remembered. And now we have more chairs than we used to. And Dad laughs again. And I'm not scared anymore that people are gonna leave, because you never left. Not even the time I was awful about the pasta. She took a shaky breath. So will you please stay forever and be in our family? Me and Mr. Pockets want you to. And Dad wants you to. And I think Mom would want you to. Because Mom would want Dad to laugh. Everybody who loved some wants them to laugh again. A beat. Especially the ones who aren't here. And Adrienne Vance, the Ice Queen, the dragon, the woman who fired her own heart, the billionaire who built $40 billion of armor so she would never have to sit in a room with somebody who might leave, got down on her knees, right there, on the industrial carpet of her own building, so that an 8-year-old would not have to look up at her. And she took Wesley Marsh's hand, the 3rd time, and exactly like the first time in that hallway, and exactly like the 2nd time in an empty apartment at 9 o'clock at night, she did not say a single word. She didn't need to. She just held on. With Wren's arms around her neck and a stuffed rabbit crushed between the 3 of them on the floor of the 14th floor, in the exact place where a tired man had once made a terrible joke. And when she finally could talk, this is what she said. Yes, to all 3 of you. And then to the little girl, because the little girl was the one who had asked. People are going to want this to be a story about a man who broke down my walls. It isn't. My walls were mine. I built them out of something real, and nobody had the right to knock them down, and nobody could have. She put her hand against Wren's cheek. Your dad just sat outside, and waited, and he never once asked me to open anything. Her voice went. And one day I understood that for 7 years I had been holding that door shut myself, from the inside, and that all I ever had to do was let go of it. They were married in the spring, small in a room she could have filled with 400 people, and chose not to. Wren carried Mr. Pockets down the aisle along with the flowers, because some things you don't leave behind. Coralie Whitcomb sat in the second row on the bride's side because Adrienne asked her to, and because when Adrienne asked, Coralie said, "Well, somebody's got to be over there, honey. She hasn't got anybody." And then went and sat there and cried harder than anyone. The foundation opened 18 months later. The Thorn Marsh Fund. 2 names, neither of them hers. It covers medication for children whose parents are between jobs, or between insurance, or between disasters. Children like a 7-year-old with asthma, whose father once had $40 in checking and a monster on the phone before 7 in the morning. Winifred Osgood runs it. 72 years old when she took the job, and it is the first office in her life, with her name on the door, and she keeps 30 years of notebooks in a cabinet behind her desk. When people ask her how it happened, she says the same thing every time. A tired man from the 14th floor knocked on my door with a bakery box and asked me a question. That's the whole story. Somebody looked twice. Simone Adeyemi is her deputy. Gordon Sales never worked in finance again. And in an apartment that is not empty at the end of a hallway, there is a room painted a green that an 8-year-old chose with a mushroom lamp and a stuffed elephant on the windowsill, and the blinds up always up. 2 people had been handed the same impossible number by 2 different doctors years apart in 2 different rooms. And they found each other in the middle of the same wilderness, and they learned the one thing nobody tells you, that the stone never gets any lighter. It's just easier to carry when somebody is holding your other hand. They didn't need to be fixed. They needed somebody who would stay, and they stayed.